Seems like we just did this. And it's lovely to be back again so soon. Sometimes the gap between visits feels so long. For this morning's thoughts, I want to play a little bit with the metaphor of wilderness. It's a really powerful and very prominent image in the book of Exodus, as you know well. So I just want to give a little bit of context for the passage that I'll read. In the part of the ancient myth of the foundation of the Israelite people that we'll hear in a moment, the 12 tribes of the Israelites have begun their passage out from 400 years of slavery in Egypt. 10 plagues have happened. Pharaoh has relented. The people have packed up whatever they can carry. And the great exodus from the narrow confinement of Egypt begins. Moses is at the head of the line, charged by the great and invisible mystery with leading the newly released slaves into freedom. The journey begins into a new possibility, really energetically, if the Cecil B. DeMille version can be believed. But there is a wilderness to be encountered. And that's where we pick up this fragment of the story. So I'm reading from Exodus, the 13th chapter, verses 20 to 22. They set out from Sukkot and camped at Etam on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went in front of them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them along the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light so that they could travel by night or day. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. They camped on the edge of the wilderness. That phrase almost literally jumped off the page when I read it again for perhaps the 1000th time. It simply would not leave me alone. So whenever that happens, I usually understand it to mean dig here for treasure. So here we go. The book of Deuteronomy describes wilderness as great and terrible. The prophet Jeremiah, the woe is me guy, he describes wilderness as a land of deserts and pits, a land of droughts and deadly darkness, a land through which no human being has passed and where no human has dwelt. So contemplating wilderness is a pretty daunting exercise. At this point in the Exodus saga, the great masses of people, some 600,000 according to the tradition, they've not yet made it to the Red Sea and the dramatic parting of the waters. They're camped at the edge of the great unknown, a bewildering wilderness, if you will, being asked to trust a great impossibility, that they will be guided by the wispiness of a pillar of cloud by day. Just picture the fog over the harbor this morning. They'll be guided by a wispiness pillar of cloud by day and a flame by darkness at night. All this as they make the treacherous journey from slavery into freedom. Now, it won't be long in the story before any number of voices will cry out to Moses, demanding, why has he led them into the wilderness to die? There were melons and onions and garlic and food and water in Egypt. Selective memory at work. They forgot the narrowness of life in slavery. So barely on the road to freedom, their trust in the integrity of the powerful movement afoot is already fraying. Contemplating entrance into the bewildering wildness of the wilderness is daunting. So I think it might be fair to say that at any moment in our lives, we might find ourselves metaphorically at the edge of the wilderness. That place that might be defined as totally unknown territory. I think we can all relate to this. We might find ourselves at the edge of the wilderness when the physician's office calls and says, "We've got the results of your scans, you better make an appointment." Or when an employer says, "Come into my office, but close the door." Or when a beloved dies unexpectedly, when a great unknown opens up. The edge of the wilderness might become a reality when an unanticipated conflict manifests itself in a friendship or in the family. Even a positive thing like beginning to envision a possible future for the community for the next 5 years, that could be a threshold of a wilderness of sorts. When I woke up this morning, I thought, even aging is being on the threshold of a wilderness. These are all life processes that have the potential for placing at the edge of a wilderness, peering into an expanse of unknown territory where there's uncertainty, maybe a time of not knowing, a certain kind of bewilderment, perhaps even a discomforting sense of impossibility. All get stirred up with varying degrees of anxiety about what comes next. There's surely an edginess to life these days as events rapidly unfold. Throughout the week, with every new headline, I could feel the challenge to rewrite and revise as I worked through the sermon, because we're in a wilderness, no doubt about it. And sometimes it's hard to discern and embrace what's possible. And it's an even greater challenge to embrace dreams of the impossible, all those hopes and yearnings that we might want to bring into reality, to bring some kind of order and light into the wilderness. Yet, if we are to trust the arc of so much wisdom literature, we might be challenged with the notion that the wilderness that seems impossible also has the potential for being a place of transition and transformation. There's a dynamic possibility here. In the early history of the Christian movement, back in the 4th and 5th centuries of the Common Era, there was actually a movement afoot where people who were seeking to be followers of the way faced the question how to remain faithful when the surrounding culture was losing its moral center. They wanted to learn how to live in the world without becoming shaped by its distortions. So they actually chose to leave their settled lives and establish dwellings for themselves in the desert wilderness, to spend time entertaining impossible dreams for a saner and more resilient life, to discern how they needed to be in order to bring a saner order to life back in the world. So they moved from the edge of the wilderness head on into its wild and unpredictable silence to meet the challenges that it might offer. But the wilderness was never the final destination. For the ancient tribes, that wilderness, 40 years they spent there, was a training ground for learning how to live together as a people outside the bounds of slavery. But they would not remain in the wilderness forever. The wilderness was a place of transition and transformation. Now, most of us are not called to geographic withdrawal. We're not going to pack our bags, take the boat, and head out to the Badlands. For most of us, seeking a time out in a physical wilderness just isn't practical or possible. So rather, we're called to the wilderness of the deep interior places where we might find the power to resist the confusing external dissonances that threaten us with confusion and doubt. A campsite at the edge of the wilderness, whatever that daunting wilderness may be at any given time, is a really uncomfortable place to be. There's always the choice to stay there, right at the edge, disengaged. But there's also the choice to head directly into the wildness, into what seems like an impossibility to confront. Reverend Cameron Trimble, he's a priest in the Benedictine tradition, offered some thoughts about what we might need in our backpacks before we enter into the wilderness. What we might need for living in the wilderness without becoming shaped by its distortions. Here's what he affirms that we need to know. The first is that we can journey in the wilderness of the external world of confusion and lies and distortion without surrendering our souls. And we do this by going inward to our own internal quiet wilderness, finding a place of silence, a place of companionship, a place of wisdom, a place of moral imagination. But he says this takes practice. It takes setting boundaries around our attention, deciding where we're going to focus our attention. And I love this one, it takes rhythms that interrupt outrage. Have you felt outraged? We need rhythms that help to interrupt that cycle of outrage so that we find moments of peace and disengagement for time to time from what outrages us in order to gain perspective. He says it takes communities that tell the truth to one another gently and directly. Going into the wilderness takes time. It means we need to take time for some form of prayer or silence or honest reflection that clears away the emotional distortions so that they don't harden into some sense of our identity, so that we do not become identified with the rigidity that limits abundant life. Right now, so many people feel spiritually flooded, saturated with alarm, with analysis, with reaction, with dread. It seems as though our nervous systems simply do not get the chance to power down. Our moral imagination never gets quite quiet enough to hear wisdom instead of impulse. Those elders who spent time in the wilderness, they would recognize this immediately. Their advice to us would be, they would tell us, don't disappear. They would tell us to build inner ground. They would tell us to create small deserts of clarity inside daily life, spaces where truth can survive. They would tell us to stay rooted in our communities. They would tell us to stay practiced in humility and courage. They would tell us to stay shaped by love more than by fear. The wilderness that we encounter, whether it's personal, and we all have them, or collective and communal, those wildernesses may seem like a land of deserts and of pits, a land of droughts, deadly darkness, a land through which no human has passed and where no human has dwelt. But this same wilderness may also be the place where we are transformed. It takes courage to embrace the wilderness. And yet it is from this rooted and grounded place, right in the midst of the wilderness, that we may encounter what seems impossible. And we can begin to dream and nourish it into reality. When I first started thinking about traversing the wilderness in which we may find ourselves, the melody and the opening words of The Impossible Dream kept running through my head at night. It kept me awake, wouldn't let me sleep. I'm sure you've all had those, I call them earworms. You've had them from time to time. To dream the impossible dream. It was another one of those dig here for treasure episodes. It's a powerful song from the heart of a man who is willing to pursue his dreams no matter how impossible they may seem. And it's a great, great edge of the wilderness song. So I think Sarah, hear these closing words. We are attendants at the wake of the old way. And each of us, through our actions, our thoughts, our work, and our relationships, is midwifing a new world into existence. And when we come to our days with this awareness, when we fully wake up to this tremendous privilege, when we sense the oak in the acorn of our beings, then we will have the energy to move mountains and shift the tides. With this as our charge, may we return to our lives this week ready to make real the possibilities that are waiting to be born. Our closing hymn is an energetic African American spiritual, and it's appropriate as we enter another week of wilderness and uncertainty. So as we sing it together, may it strengthen our commitment to dream what seems impossible into reality. Number 162, gonna lay down my sword and shield.